Colleagues, I will be sharing with you briefly from, it's just a snippet from my PhD study. My PhD study that looks at the, now how do I move from the first slide to there? My PhD study is looking at the role of traditional leadership in school governance, and the impacts that they make, either positive or negative. And at this stage, I've just collected the data and I'm actually getting my feel of what is emerging. So I'm just sharing with you basically the impressions from the data at this stage, and then draw some few conclusions on that. But for the purposes of this paper, I've selected two questions which were just of interest to me when I was looking at the data. The first question being, how do members of school school community see, what value do they see in traditional leaders in their context? And the second one being, if they see value, how do they suggest can that relationship be strengthened for the benefit of the school? So I'll be sharing briefly what emerged in the conversations about those two questions. So the focus of the paper is deliberately on the school community relations. Just for your interest, my data sources are in front of you. I had about 76 participants from those different categories: school governing body parents, school governing body learners, school management teams, traditional councils. In KZN, we call them superintendents of education management. Elsewhere, they are called EDOs. Elsewhere, they are specialists of some sort. So I'm using my province categorization of the circuit managers or district managers in this case. So that's the conversations were with those people. What are some of the emerging issues in the data that I'll share with you? I'm going to go in depth on the two questions that I've highlighted earlier. What is emerging is that traditional leadership support infrastructure development in schools. They also support quality teaching and learning. They participate in school governing bodies in various ways, either as members or as co-opted members in those bodies. They do enhance healthy school community relations. It's coming clear in my data. They do promote indigenous culture and knowledge systems through schools. They do use the schools as venues to promote that. And they do promote school safety and security in schools. They support effective school management. Maybe let me backtrack 1 second to say that there are 8 schools participating in the study. There are 2 communities. In each community, there are 4 schools, 2 primary schools and 2 secondary schools, all in the same, under the same traditional leadership. The reason being, I wanted to see what the interaction between the traditional council and those schools, and whether there are variations in the interaction. So I just want to give you that bit background. In what they see as value in involving traditional leaders, or in creating a platform where traditional leaders are involved in schooling, here are some of the things that emerged. They have made it possible for schools to strengthen parental involvement. They have promoted unity and cultural identity among members of school community. Now, if you speak to traditional leaders in those 2 communities, that is what they pride themselves to have done. They speak very passionately about this point. Because schools are built on the land administered by traditional leaders, there are few things that schools have found to have to navigate that. Firstly, to make sure that if there is any infrastructural development pertaining to the schools, it has to be discussed with traditional leaders. But interestingly, sometimes those discussions elsewhere, there would be a lot of some kind of tossing and turning and fighting about land issues. But in those two communities, it was quite positive. And I believe the reason is that it's coming quite clearly that traditional leaders in those two communities have actually pioneered the building of schools. Where there were no schools, they've actually mobilized powers that be to make sure that the schools are there for the children of their nation, of the nation. And in talking about how then, because they do see value in this, how then do we strengthen this relationship for the benefit of the schools? The suggestions that came across in the discussions were that the involvement of traditional leadership can be strengthened by increasing cultural activities in schools. It can be strengthened by using respect, humility, and cooperation with traditional leadership, and always keeping promises made to each other. By also maintaining a right and positive attitude towards traditional leaders and mutual learning from each other. Maintaining constant communication between traditional leadership in various levels of education management, from district to schools, as well as in some cases with the province as well. But again, there was another suggestion that said, for the schools to benefit maximally from the relationship, traditional leaders themselves, they have to strengthen their footprints in the school community through various educational programs, and those programs are not just for children but also for parents on how to parent properly. Because in some of the conversations, it was coming out quite clearly that what children are exposed to in terms of programs, teaching them positive self-esteem, teaching them other things, when they get to where they live at home, the teaching is quite different, and then you find that there's a problem right there. And also that they should prevent illegal influx of people into community, to prevent what they called cultural dilution. If you allow any stranger to come and build in your land, then you are running a risk of diluting culture, whatever that means. I'm still trying to understand that. Let me just conclude quickly by saying traditional leadership, as we know that they are custodians of land, culture, and indigenous education knowledge system. They have supported infrastructural development and effective teaching and learning in schools. My study shows the members of school community do see value in establishing as well as in strengthening and maintaining this relationship and sustaining it. And looking at what is coming up, it can ensure that there is a strong community support that supports learner progression from cradle to career. And that traditional leadership needs to maintain a close communication with various levels of educational management.